Welcome, Sean.
Thank you for the invite. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for saying yes and allowed me to introduce you to this amazing audience. Now, I have the pleasure to learn from you for the past year, just being in Lisa Nichols campus, and everything that you ever said makes perfect sense. Really hit me. I could feel the emotions coming through right now as I speak. And while I decided to put the summit together, the intention of it is to invite people to tap into their own power, to tap into their own voice, to heal their voice in order for them to use it powerful to support others and create an impact. So far for the past 3 days, our amazing speakers, being taking us to a journey from how to use your story to create a movement, to healing your inner child so you could step into your authenticity as an adult, and so many other juicy topics. What we learned, agreed, accepted, and committed to is to heal our story and heal our voice so we could actually create an impact. So as I ask you to specifically talk with us about healing wounded masculinity, that invitation is still open, and I just want to give you the floor and take us where you feel called to take us based on where we've been so far.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. And at any point, if you have anything to add, then please do. So, it's a big topic. I personally think that healing the collective masculine wound will transform everything. It will transform society. And just to lay the context here, I'll define what I mean by the masculine wound so everybody understands the way I'm using it. The masculine wound is how we are wounded by the masculine energy. And the masculine wound happens when the masculine is wounded. This isn't male, female, it's masculine, feminine. But most men in our society are programmed that only masculinity is okay. So the masculine wound manifests itself differently in men and women, where I think in men, we're actually celebrated to hurt, right? Whether it's sports or on TV, with the action characters and the action movies. I mean, those are usually men doing the damage and shooting people with the guns and all of that. There's a celebration among men around power and domination and force and really damage. We celebrate our ability to damage. Not explicitly, that's not what we're specifically taught, but we're implicitly taught to destroy and to compete. And so we think that one of the ways that we can get stronger is by making somebody else weaker. And that's one of the ways that, and one of the reasons why when the masculine is wounded, it tends to want to wound somebody else. And it's really just trying to restore. It's trying to restore whatever was just taken from it. So when the masculine energy, which is all about strength and rigidity and toughness and protection, when the masculine energy feels weak, vulnerable, incompetent, impotent on any level, not just sexually, but just I can't do, the masculine wants to overcompensate with whatever the deficit is. So if I feel like I had my power taken from me, my masculine wound wants to take power from somebody else. If I feel like I was just dominated in some form of competition, my masculine wound wants to dominate somebody else in competition. And that's just at a deep base juvenile level. At an elementary level, that's how the masculine wound operates in the context of what we're talking about here. So the masculine wound tends to hurt outward. And what usually happens is the masculine hurts the feminine because the feminine is a threat to the masculine. It's a perceived threat.
Wait, let's say that one more time.
Yeah, I see you responding to some of these things because these are big, deep, but also really simple concepts. And so the masculine and feminine are not at odds with each other. They are not threats to each other inherently. In their pure divine form, they are a perfect union. The masculine protects the feminine nurtures the masculine. And there's a cycle that works in beautiful synergy. When the masculine is wounded, usually, generally by another wounded masculine, then the feminine energy becomes a threat. It's a perceived threat to the wounded masculine. And that's when the masculine energy will then hurt in some form, abuse, control that feminine energy. And it's essentially me not wanting the light to be shined on my insecurities, right? That's one of the lines of that song is I don't want your light to light up to expose what I'm trying to hide. So rather than me heal what I'm trying to hide, it's easier for me to turn your light off. Because if I can just dominate you and turn your light off, then what I'm trying to hide won't be exposed, or at least I think it won't be exposed. And that's why the feminine voice is so repressed. A lot of times it's the masculine wound that shuts the voice down and shuts the light off because of the insecurities of the masculine. And so the feminine energy, when wounded, doesn't hurt back. That's not in the feminine nature. The feminine nature is support and flow and fluid and nurturing and unconditional, divine, pure love. So the feminine energy doesn't even have the thought to hurt back when it's hurt. What the feminine energy generally does is not understand, why did I get hurt when I'm not a threat and I don't even understand what happened? I'm just going to retreat. So when the feminine is wounded, it retreats into the shadows. To put this in practical terms, women primarily shut down their own voice. First, their voice was shut down externally, but then they learned speaking up is not safe. Last time that happened, I got shut down, I got punished, I got yelled at. So it's safer to not speak than it is to speak and be punished. And then that internal suppression becomes a way that the feminine, quite often in the form of the female body, lives life in this repression because she doesn't want to be punished. The answer is not to suppress the light, because then the cycle will just continue, and then the beauty and the strength of the feminine spirit will never actually be felt by the masculine. So the answer here is to heal the masculine wound so that the masculine doesn't hurt the feminine energy. And then that's how the cycle can be broken. But practically speaking, what we're essentially saying is we're asking the men to heal themselves, right? And that's not a very easy message to get across. Now, I want to be really clear. This masculine wound can show up in women for sure. The mother that harms her child, she's not acting out of her feminine energy. She's a female acting out of her masculine wound. And I guarantee she was wounded by the masculine first for her to even learn that process. And then she wounds with her masculine. So I just want to be really clear about that. That the male female context here is more about our society programming than it is the energy. So the ultimate solution is that we heal, we as the masculine and we primarily as men in our society, we heal our wounds so that we no longer have the temptation, the desire, or any level of satisfaction in hurting other people, both men and women. If we can remove our ammo, again, one of the parts of the song is I no longer had self-hatred for my ammunition, specifically for me with my mom. And as soon as I no longer had the self-hatred to use to hurt her, I didn't have the desire to hurt her. It was only when I was being driven by this wound that I had the desire. So what that means for a lot of us as men is we have to look in the mirror, something that we're not supposed to do, something that we will be dismissed in many, if not most, man circles, right? There's a joke about losing your man card. You know, if you show up vulnerable and you're a sissy and you let anybody dominate you, then you lose your man card. And what that essentially means is we as men are going to dismiss you. And little boys are taught that from a very young age, both implicitly and explicitly. We're taught, don't be a little girl, don't cry, don't be weak, don't be the P word, right? If you are, the embedded message is we won't protect you anymore. So that's why young boys, once they get clear on that message, they want to do anything to not be dismissed by the pack of men. I don't think I've ever said that before, the pack of men.
Right? So I'm just gonna interview for a minute. Like, oh my God, this is so juicy and it's so much here. Like, we could dissect it in so many zillions of pieces and go deeper, right? Like this alone, I want everybody to just play it over and over and over and over and over and over, because you're gonna hear it like different message every time, right? So I'm just gonna share, as like everybody hears, it's used with me, like being fully transparent and just sharing like what I'm experiencing. And while you were talking about male and female and how they're healing and what they're doing, I totally like went totally in and recognized, like that was my process, my personal process of healing. Recognize this battle internally between my masculine energy and my feminine energy. Yeah. And while I was trying so damn hard to heal myself, to forgive myself, it took a minute to realize that I've been driven all my life through all my challenges by that masculine energy. And I needed to love it, honor it, be thankful for, grateful for, because that's what got me through all the shit that I went through. Bingo. Right?
Yeah.
Like that energy of like, prove them wrong. You could do this. Don't give up, right? So I just want to honor the positivity and the power in that masculine energy. Like that was my journey up until the point I actually get to tap into like, but how can I express my femininity? Like literally get rid of like being so damn bossy and so that whatever that it's rooted in masculinity, you know? So do you mind take us a little bit into the internal conversation between the masculine and feminine energy that we all have regardless of our gender, right?
Yeah, that's a great I feel like I'm rolling up my sleeves here, like, all right, let's dive into this. I'm glad you brought that up, because we all do have masculine, feminine inside of us, and the same relationship happens internally as well as externally. What usually happens is our feminine energy, by the way, this happened to me too. Once upon a time when I was young, I just showed up and I was just myself and I was, authentic, and I got shut down. I got punished in a certain way. And my internal feminine energy said, don't do that again. So my internal masculine energy did take over, just like you said. And when the masculine takes over, we want to be perfect. We want to be tough. We want to go do things and get things and succeed, whatever that looks like. And there's a lot of power and importance in that. So I'm glad that you talked about honoring the masculine energy, because the masculine wound does not mean that all of the masculine energy is bad. And one of the things, one of the phrases that's being used out there in this conversation is toxic masculinity. a lot of men don't like that phrase because they think toxic is an adjective for masculinity, meaning that they feel threatened because people are saying all masculinity is toxic. But
Mm-hmm.
what we have to understand is toxic is a form of masculinity. That's one of the reasons why I talk about the masculine wound, not necessarily masculine toxicity, but only the wound is toxic.
Right.
The masculine energy itself is not toxic. It's actually very powerful. And one of the things that the masculine does, this is where it gets really intriguing to me and even more juicy. One of the things that the masculine energy inherently does is protect and preserve life, protect and preserve that which it loves. So when the masculine gets wounded and it hurts other people, it's actually operating in the exact opposite of its divine commitment, of its inherent desire. So that's when the power to protect turning into the intention to destroy is actually operating in opposition of what it's doing. So let's take that conversation and turn it internal. What do we do a lot when we're trying to achieve something and we fail or we get rejected? One of the things that most of us deal with is our internal chatter, right? Our internal punisher. And we tell ourselves we're not good enough. We tell ourselves we should have been better. You should be perfect. That's a form of self abuse because we're not unconditionally loving ourselves. We're only conditionally loving ourselves, but usually the conditions that we set are unachievable. So if you're perfect, then I will encourage you and then I will love you. What we have to understand is that's not a natural voice, it's just a familiar voice. There is no child, in my opinion, that was ever born beating themselves up. That's not a natural human desire to hurt anybody, let alone self. That's a learned, programmed pattern. So if we understand that when we're beating ourselves up like that, we are operating inside of our masculine wound and punishing our feminine desire to be real, to be open, to be authentic, then this cycle that we're talking about is happening internally. I wrote a poem one time about my journey through self abuse. And it's called The Soul's Stand. And I don't remember exactly what I was talking about, but something in this conversation, I had this really clear vision of me turning around and looking into myself, looking into my eyes. And as I continue to get closer and closer into my eyes, what was behind them showed up. Like if you can imagine a wall with a tiny slit in the wall, when you're far away from the wall, you can't see through there. But if you go all the way up to it, then you can kind of peek in and see what's behind the wall. But you've got to get close like that. And that's what I did. I got close to my eyes and then I looked inside and what I saw was me on this cold brick floor, crying, cowering, because I was being abused. And I looked and who was doing the abusing? Of course, it was me. And while the abuse was happening from me, on me, but it was all hidden behind my eyes, nobody else can see it. And that's what so many of us are dealing with, is that we've got this internal, I call it the self-abuse room. We've got this internal self-abuse room. And until we stop that self-abuse, we will have the tendency to continue the pattern of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that might turn into abusing our body. It might turn into abusing our goals or our drive or our dreams. It might turn into the ego abusing our soul. It might turn into abusing other people. But it's all happening because we've got a cycle of abuse going on inside of us. And that's where, going back to the way we started this conversation, that's where healing is so important. Because if we can heal the wound that's causing the punisher to want to punish, because it's being fueled by the wound. If we can heal the wound, then the punisher stops cracking the whip, and then the cycle of self-abuse stops, which causes the cycle of internal abuse or physical body abuse or external abuse or substance abuse of any kind. It causes all of that to either stop or at least slow down to where we can have better control over it. But most of us are trying to stop some kind of external abuse, whether we're doing it or it's being done to us, without stopping the internal
Mm.
abuse. And one of the things that you said that's so critical is we have to honor that masculine spirit for what it does for us and how it has protected us, because there's love inside there. We just need to realize, where is it wounded? And if we can remove the wound, then we will remove the desire for harm. And wounding or healing wounds is actually about undoing the things that were done to us and the protection layers that we put on, which is extremely empowering if we know that we actually aren't wounded. Like, our soul is not wounded. The perception of us being wounded is in the layers that we've put around our soul.
To
It's
protect.
in the layers that we've put. It's like if you watch little kids learning how to walk. You know, a little child gets up and tries to walk and they fall down. That child does not need to be consoled that it's okay to fall down, because that child doesn't know it's not okay
Until we teach them.
until it's taught. Exactly.
So I did hear a thing that you did not say, but this is what I hear. It's how I function.
Perfect.
Of that internal conversation between the masculine and feminine energy, and then the self-abuse. I mean, self-abuse, everyone. Do I not know it?
Mm,
Decades of self-abuse. And it's a conversation, isn't it? It's a internal conversation between me and myself and I. So
yep.
we are getting there and we are like abusing the crap out of each other. And now somebody from outside is coming with a comment, with a critic, with a judgment. And of course, they just enjoy the conversation that it's already created.
Yeah.
So it's how I visualize it, right? Of like, I see myself from the timeline, all versions of myself since I was a little girl up until not too long ago, or even today, because there's still so much more to be healed. And like all the version is, it's a gathering of myself. And then as soon that conversation is changing, people, they're judging and they're critics, that they can't penetrate there because it's a different conversation. They just don't belong there. And I just want to give that perspective to those that need to hear it, of the importance again of inner work and transformation, or whatever the hell you want to do with your life and with yourself. Is like, it's really starting with you. And that what the power is. I have the power to change the conversation.
Yeah.
But I can't change it from outside. I can't just shut everyone down while I'm still in that conversation internally.
That's everything. Yeah, that's the application. That's the work that we can actually do, because we can stop abusing ourselves. But we have to understand, this is a pattern that for most of us has been entrenched and embedded for decades. And many of us, probably most of us, can't remember a time when we didn't abuse ourselves, because most of us started abusing ourselves before the age of 4, 3, 2. A lot of times it's before we can consciously remember. So it feels like we've always abused ourselves, only because we don't remember consciously when we didn't. But what you're saying is so critical for us to get, because that actually can happen. Whereas as you said, you can't protect yourself from all the potential criticisms and all the risks of the world, but you can internally cut yourself off from them. So as you were talking, I'm still in the analogy that I gave. If I'm inside of myself whipping me with my internal dialogue, and you come across and you go, and you know what, Sean, you're a terrible father. It's like you just handed me another whip. You essentially gave me a weapon, and my punisher will use that weapon and go, yeah, you know what? You are a terrible father. And then I will beat myself up with the weapon out of your mouth. But if I've stopped that abuse, you can offer me whatever weapon you want. There's no abuse happening here.
Right.
So you give me a whip, you give me a gun, you give me a knife, it doesn't matter because I'm not abusing myself. So what can we actually stop? Can we stop the availability of external weapons? No. But can we stop the internal use of all weaponry? Yes. And in that scenario, we can stop the effect of any external abuse opportunities that we have. And this is not easy to do because a lot of us don't understand it. And again, these are patterns, and a lot of us don't know who we would be. Oh,
Do we go there?
a lot of us don't know who we would be without our self abuse because it has become not just a pattern, but an identity.
So as I share, I did a lot of healing, like really got into myself into the space to publish my story, and was all good, pretty much so, close to 100%. Like I have this like visual, I'm gonna push the publish button when I'll be ready for my story to be shared with the whole world, right? Like that means it's healed, I own it, and everything that goes into it. Nobody prepare me, and here's that part of me that it's blaming others, right? To say, hey, when you drop all that pain, you will have to learn who to be and how to live without the pain.
Yeah.
So we heal the wound, and then what? Can you give us a couple tools, new toys to play with internally? Not the guns, not the knives. We need new toys of love and compassion to play with. We heal, we drop the load, we drop the pain. How do we integrate? How do we accept this new being?
Yeah, it's terrifying to our intellect because our intellect wants to know what to do. And really, what the intellect doesn't even understand enough to ask is that we are no longer in a what to do conversation. We're now in a how to be conversation. And none of us needs to learn how to be. We just need permission to be. That's where the intellect gets its mind blown because that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, especially in a world where we are defined by and we are identified by what we do. And we've been protecting ourselves from these wounds by doing. So when we take that away and we essentially show up naked, it's about permission to be unfamiliar because our intellect will tell us this doesn't look good, this doesn't feel good, this is uncomfortable, let's cover back up again. This happens a lot. I've got more to say, but I'll give you another example. We were just talking about this yesterday with one of our coaching groups. This happens a lot with weight loss, primarily with women. A lot of times women that have been abused on any level, or it's just been unsafe to have visibility on their bodies specifically, because women just have this value assessed and connected to their physical bodies. And so all of that kind of attention is potentially dangerous and scary. And especially if a woman has been abused on any level of intensity, one of the ways that a lot of women protect themselves is with weight, because it's a physical barrier. It's a physical protective layer. And when a lot of women decide to lose their weight, but they don't heal the wound that the weight was covering,
Yeah.
then the wound is now just exposed.
Mm.
And when the wound is exposed, that's scarier than having the wound covered up. And that's one of the unconscious reasons why we'll put the weight back on, because the wound actually didn't get exposed, or didn't get healed rather. And what we did is we just told ourselves to take the protection off and then expose all of our wounds. So back to the question, when we do this healing work, and you mentioned reconnecting all of and all the versions of yourself, that's why doing internal relationship work is so critical. Inner child work is so critical. Healing this pattern of self abuse is so critical. So if we can clean those wounds, and by the way, I don't know of anybody that can just go in and wipe them all away, right? It's a journey,
I
because this is a very, it'd be fantastic, right? It's a process, because we've been hurting ourselves for decades. So we can't just with a snap of a finger say, now I'm going to stop doing all that, and all the effects of all that abuse will immediately go away.
Mm.
So we can't do that. That's why our intellect needs to get involved with giving ourselves permission to experience the unfamiliar. I don't like saying permission to be uncomfortable, or telling people to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because I don't think that's possible, to experience uncomfortable, or to experience unfamiliar and have it not be uncomfortable.
It's two different spaces.
Yeah. So if we relabel and we focus on, oh, this is new,
Mm.
it's not bad, it's not weird, it's not strange, it's not uncomfortable, it's not scary, I'm not vulnerable to attack, it's new. What usually happens is we actually enjoy the feeling momentarily, and then we go, uh-oh, I'm exposed. Uh-oh, or somebody will tell us that they're uncomfortable with our new strength, or the light shining, or whatever it is. And then we go in and then we assess whether we should cover it back up or not. So it's really our relationship to unfamiliar. And one of the tangible ways to get to your question, that in my experience of 15 plus years in doing this work, and I do a lot of work with coaches to do this work, right? So we're training people to do this work as well. What we've found is that the most powerful ingredient is simply support. It's, it's like when your child has a fever, there's nothing you can do as a mom to make the fever go away, but you can stay with your child while the fever is doing whatever it's doing to the body. So you can let your child know, I'm with you during this process. So what we need as humans is to know that, number one, this process is okay. But number two, that's even more important than that, this process is required. And
Mm.
in a sense, Simona, this is really like coming off of a substance addiction. One of the reasons that a lot of people don't get out of their addictions is because they never get through the withdrawals. When the body is physically addicted, and then you take that substance out that the body is now physically addicted to, there's withdrawals. Some of the withdrawals are emotional, some of the withdrawals are neurological, and it's literally happening in the body. And the body is screaming, just give me another thing that will stop the shakes, that will stop the tremors, that will stop the nightmares. Give me the thing that I know will stop it.
Mhm.
And what that is usually the substance that created it. But in this cycle of woundedness, we're just asking the discomfort to go away. And if the human deals with withdrawals for a day and then goes back to the substance and then gets off the substance and goes through the withdrawals for a couple days, but never follows all the way through and just continues that cycle, they'll never break their body of the addiction because they don't get on the other side of the withdrawals. And it's very similar in content and concept to any of the patterns that we want to break. The
Right.
patterns of love, being vulnerable inside of a relationship, or being visible as a speaker, one of the journeys that you're going through right now. We have to understand that the body's fear is always going to happen when we remove the covers, when we remove the layers, especially if those layers feel like they're our skin now because we've attached to it as identities. So us removing the layers sometimes feels like we're literally ripping our skin away.
Yeah.
Because our skin has grown into it. So if we understand that's part of the process and that's required, and on the other side of it, you can't even currently comprehend what life without that layer looks like right now, what life without that identity looks like right now. And it's okay that you can't know. It's impossible to know, but I will be with you through your withdrawals. I'll be with you and nurture and protect and talk to you and let you know that I went through the same thing. So what I've learned is the most important ingredient in this process for human healing is a tight support system from people that have gone through it. That doesn't mean our family. In fact, very rarely is it our family, because they're mixed into the ingredients that cause the layers in the first place. And a lot of times they haven't done the healing, so they can't tell you what it's like on the other side because they're not on the other side. And very rarely is it our close friends, because we've built relationships with all of these people that are close. I call it our front row. We've built the relationships with all the people in our front row with our layers.
They are part of it.
They're baked into the recipe. Yeah. So it's really, really difficult to simultaneously take off the layers that have the people baked into them, getting support from those people. And a lot of times those people might be attached to our layers. They might not know who we are without those layers. They might not want to know who we are without those layers. So most of the time, in my experience, our front row actually tries to keep our layers on for their own comfort. That's why we usually need to get outside of that front row, get outside of the people that are baked into the layers, so that we have that support and understand that this process isn't emotionally easy. Human healing is very simple, but it's excruciating to the intellect. And our relationship to the healing process will determine our experience of the healing process. I don't think I've ever said that before.
Oh, that's so good.
Our relationship, our relationship to and understanding of the healing process will determine our experience of the healing process. If we don't like it and we want it to be easy, then it will get prolonged if it ever happens at all. If we say, I've had enough of life with layers and being attached to all these things that I'm not, I don't care how long it's going to take. I don't care what I need to do. This soul needs to be released. Then the healing process will go faster, and it will be a lot less catastrophic and a lot less emotionally destructive. That doesn't mean we won't feel. You could talk.
We don't have to make it alone, and that's the golden nuggets that I want everybody to just pay attention to, like getting the support, whatever the support might look like for you today. And I think the courage in that is, okay, there's so many layers, but if we just sum it in like 2 steps, which I absolutely hate steps, but that's a separate conversation.
Like the 1, 2, 3 process to healing all your human traumas.
The secret of the secrets.
Right. Only 3 payments of $17.99, and pay now and you get a set of coat hangers.
There you go. So, but like in the phases, if you're looking at the phases of the process of like recognizing where you are, committed, deciding to do the work, asking for the support, and then willing and committing to that might look like leaving some people behind, and not behind, but leave them where they are because they no longer belong to where you are going. And
Yeah.
I know that that could be another 7-hour conversation.
Yeah.
I know that we only have so much time, but I will like, if you please, Sean, like in just in closing, to kind of put a bow on everything, and knowing that an audience, there is a lot of mentors and coaches and teachers and healers and entrepreneurs. Um, would you speak for a couple minutes to my audience here? I did a lot of trainings around confidence.
Yeah.
And I know I love how you teach confidence. And what I hear you saying not too long ago, a few weeks ago, you said one thing that really hit me. I'm like, okay, I need to ask Sean to speak about that to the summit because
Mm.
there's other people to hear it too. You said that, oh God, how did you say it? I wish I could make a note about it. Paraphrasing, the lack of confidence, it's actually what makes you a better mentor or a better coach.
Yeah.
We are all familiar with, I'm just going to wait until I'm ready, until I get my certificate, until I'm perfecting the script and the programs and whatever and whatever. But would you take us to that? I found it fitting with the conversation of
Sure.
taking the courage to step when you're not ready and how we access this confidence.
Yeah, you said 7 hour. That would be part one of a 5 part deep dive discussion about this. But absolutely, it's critical for us to understand again what that process is like of stepping out of the shadows. And the reason we're in the shadows, whatever that looks like, that could be like not speaking up in a relationship, or that could be people that are afraid of public speaking, or people that are struggling with marketing if they're in business. Whatever that fear of visibility is, that's what put us in the shadows. What most of us are trying to do, which you alluded to, is to get rid of all of our fears of the spotlight before stepping into the spotlight. And what I've learned in my journey is the fear of the spotlight can only be healed in the spotlight. You will not overcome the fear and then step into the arena that you were afraid of first, because it's not possible. It's like if you have a fear, if you were bitten by a dog one time as a child, your brain will say, I don't ever want to get bitten by this dog. And so the brain creates a fear that you didn't have before. And this fear is of this particular dog that bit you. But because the brain wants to overprotect us, we create not a fear of that individual dog, but a fear of that breed of dog. So everything that looks like that thing, we're now afraid of. And then the brain goes, let's take it a step further. Let's just be afraid of all dogs. And then the brain goes, let's take it a step further. Let's be afraid of all things that look like dogs, potentially all four-legged animals. And then the brain goes, let's just be afraid of all animals. And then the brain says, let's be afraid of putting our hand out. Because if we never put our hand out, then we can never be bitten. The way the brain operates to over exaggerate our fears like this actually works. Because if I'm afraid of what happens in the spotlight and my brain convinces me to never get in the spotlight until I know that I won't experience the risk of the spotlight, then I'll have permission to go, right? So if the brain convinces me that I need to be perfect, I need to have a guarantee that I won't fail. I need a guarantee that when I speak up, everybody is going to like it. Nobody's going to slap me on the wrist or tell me to shut up. That's why we become perfectionists. We become perfectionists because we were taught that our imperfections are risky, that our imperfections are dangerous, and that we'll be punished for our imperfections. That's why we tend to put on this layer of perfection, and we think, and it makes all the sense in the world, we think that if we are perfect, people won't see our imperfections, and if they can't see our imperfections, then they can't ridicule us for them. And that's this over exaggeration process. So then what do? We want to become perfect before we speak up again, before we go out into the spotlight. The real truth is, especially nowadays, the real truth is there is no trust in perfection. Number one, we can't trust our perfection because it's only based on our ability to predict the path. So if I have some internal script going on in my mind and I'm going to say something and then you're going to say something after that, and then my next line is based on you saying the line that I'm prepared for, if you don't say that line, then I don't know what to do. I don't trust my own perfection, but if I show up as perfect, you can't trust my perfection because you don't see yourself in my perfection. So the catch 22, like this is what we do as humans. I mean, bless our hearts, but what we do as humans is we try to become the thing that actually disconnects us
Ah,
from everybody. But we think that we're protecting ourselves from people, but there's no connection in protection. So if I show up with my heart protected, you're not going to hurt it, but you also won't feel it. So you can't take my heart and step on it, but you also can't take my heart and hold it and nurture it and teach me that you are safe and that I'm safe when I allow myself to be seen. So the real answer, if we want human connection, and then if we want to be impactful as humans, especially as leaders, whether we're coaches or authors or speakers or whatever that leadership looks like, we have to show up as fully exposed as we possibly can for the sake of people seeing themselves in us so they can trust us. Without trust, there is no connection. Without trust, there is no real leadership. Without trust, there is no rapport, and people don't trust perfect. So the things that bring our insecurities to the surface are actually opportunities to expand our leadership. Right? Your response right there to the intellect, that doesn't make any sense because we've been trying to hide all of our imperfections so that we think we can be more influential. It's actually the exact opposite if we're looking at human connection. So when you feel your doubts and your insecurities and your fears, that's the time, if we want true, authentic leadership, that's the time to lean into it. It's not something to cover up, it's something to look at and do whatever the healing work is. But you will actually have more people trusting and following you when they see the dirt on your uniform than when you show up with a clean uniform. I had this massive realization not too long ago. I was a baseball player. And one of the things me and my friends that thought like me made a conscious choice for is to never put a clean uniform back in the locker. If we were going to put a uniform on and we were going to go play a game, that uniform will get dirty because to us, that meant we were in the game. So we're going to go head first and we're going to get up and it's going to be dirty, or we're going to slide on the grass and it's going to be green and grass stained. And there were times when throughout the course of the game, we just didn't have the opportunity to dive or slide. And so we would just run. The game is totally over. We would just run and dive just to get our uniforms dirty because we did not ever want to put into the locker a clean uniform. And when I had that thought, I recognized I don't want to follow a clean uniform either. I don't want to follow the person that hasn't gotten muddy. I don't want to follow the person that hasn't learned what it's like to get back up after getting knocked down. We tend to want to show up and tell people, I've never been knocked down. And if you convince people that you've never been knocked down, you will also convince them to not follow you.
they don't
So,
relate.
right. And it doesn't make sense for us to lead with our humanity, but that's actually what the world is demanding. I'm going to write a book at some point in time based on this, and it's going to be called The Insecure Influencer. Not only can we be an influencer and insecure at the same time, but we can use our insecurities as the fuel to expand our influence with other people that share those same insecurities.
Amen.
It's such a deep topic, and I'm glad you took us there.
Oh my God. I mean, listen, you have produced thousands and thousands and thousands of content. And as I already said, it's like just on YouTube channel. Like people could just take 3 years off of their life and just go dive into your training and just fully freaking transform everything, right? So I just have so much respect for you, for your work, for how you show up in the world. I am just so honored to get to be in your space, and I don't know. I don't want to let you go, so I don't know how the hell to close this.
Well, I appreciate all of that. And
Close it for
actually,
me.
so much of what you mentioned in terms of what I've produced has been in the last 3 years. And it's been on the other side of what we started out talking about, which is the internal healing. And as soon as I was no longer afraid of people seeing my wounds, but I was also no longer afraid of me being inside of my wounds, because when I was in my wounds, I was hurting people, and I don't want to hurt people. And so I actually felt like I was this werewolf where I was afraid of that toxic energy. And we didn't even talk about this at all. I don't even know if you know this, but I did a one-man play about 3 years ago, all around my relationship with my mom and the process of diving into who I was in these various versions of my childhood, and how my anger started to grow and how I used it to project onto my mom. That's how I learned everything that we've been talking about. And as soon as I went in and healed that, no longer did I have to use it to hurt her. And then that's the genesis of the song, William the Werewolf, right? And the victim is my mom. But once I healed that, then this creativity came out of me that honestly, Simona, I'd never seen before. I don't know at this point how many poems I've written, and I've done a couple songs, and I've done a movie, and I did this one-man play. I didn't do any of that before 3 years ago. I didn't have a single poem that I
I,
can remember before 3 years ago. So when we do this healing work, what comes out of us is this natural, like, fountain of creativity and evolution and wonderment and exploration that all of our layers are suppressing. That's the exciting part that the intellect doesn't understand, but hopefully everybody that's watching this and listening to this can find hope inside of.
and I so thank you for sharing that, because this is where, especially, when we look up to people like you're a leader, I look up to you and other people do too. And it's very easy to be tricked into our old habits of like, yeah, sure, look at Sean. Well, he's been doing this for 2 decades. Oh, of course, he's making millions of dollars. Oh, of course, he has this, and that. And to hear you say, like, yeah, they're important and everything contributes to who we are, but the essence of all and the pure creativity, when we get to tap into and like fully expand and actually creating an impact, is from inside out. It's from really showing the world, like, this is who I am. And it's never, never, ever perfect.
And the one thing I'd love to leave people with is that everything we've been talking about, we'll just chalk it up to the idea of healing, is possible. There's not a human being that I've ever met that is incapable of healing. It's just that most humans are unwilling to heal.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite. I honor the journey that you're on. It was a pleasure being here.